Question 1. In ABA, behavior is defined as A. Anything a person thinks or feels. B. What a person says or does that is observable and measurable. C. Only challenging or problem actions. D. A person's personality traits. Answer. B. What a person says or does that is observable and measurable. Explanation. This question is about the fundamental definition of behavior in applied behavior analysis. The core idea in ABA is that we focus on things we can actually see and count, things that are observable and measurable. Behavior includes actions, words, or even physical responses, but only if they are specific enough that different people could agree on whether they happened. Thoughts and feelings, A, are not directly observable. ABA addresses challenging behaviors, but behavior isn't only challenging actions. C, personality traits. D, are broader concepts, not specific behaviors. So, when we talk about behavior in ABA, think about actions you can clearly see and measure, like raising a hand, saying yes, or walking across the room. Question 2. When a behavior is followed immediately by the presentation of a stimulus, and this causes the behavior to happen more often in the future, this is called A. Negative reinforcement. B. Positive punishment. C. Positive reinforcement. D. Extinction. Answer. C. Positive reinforcement. Explanation. This question asks about a core principle that increases behavior. The key clues are followed immediately by the presentation of a stimulus, something is added or given, and the behavior happening more often in the future. The behavior increases. When adding something after a behavior makes that behavior stronger, that's positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement involves removing something to increase behavior. Punishment decreases behavior. Extinction decreases behavior by stopping reinforcement. Think of positive as adding something and reinforcement as increasing behavior. Putting them together means adding something good makes the behavior happen more. Question 3. To find out what items or activities a person likes, you would conduct A. Functional analysis. B. Task analysis. C. Preference assessment. D. Skills assessment. Answer. C. Preference assessment. Explanation. This question is about how we identify potential rewards. A preference assessment is a procedure where you offer different items, activities, or edibles to see which ones a client chooses or interacts with the most. This helps you figure out what might be reinforcing for them. A functional analysis. A. Determines why a behavior happens. A task analysis. B. Breaks down a skill into steps. A skills assessment. D. Evaluates what skills a person already has. If you want to know what someone likes to use as motivation, a preference assessment is your tool. It's all about finding out what makes your client tick. Question 4. When a behavior is followed immediately by the removal of a stimulus, and this causes the behavior to happen more often in the future, this is called A. Positive punishment. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive reinforcement. D. Extinction. Answer. B. Negative reinforcement. Explanation. This question is about another way behavior can increase. The keywords are followed immediately by the removal of a stimulus, something is taken away, and the behavior happening more often in the future. The behavior increases. When taking something away after a behavior makes that behavior stronger, that's negative reinforcement. Think of negative as removing something and reinforcement as increasing behavior. Putting them together means removing something unpleasant makes the behavior happen more, like taking medicine to get rid of a headache. Question 5. When a behavior that was previously reinforced is no longer followed by reinforcement, and as a result, the behavior happens less often in the future, this procedure is called A. Punishment. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive reinforcement. D. Extinction. Answer. D. Extinction. Explanation. This question describes the process of extinction. Extinction happens when you stop providing the consequence that was previously making a behavior continue. When the behavior no longer gets its usual payoff, it starts to decrease. Punishment involves adding or removing something to decrease behavior. Reinforcement increases behavior. The key here is that you are stopping the reinforcement for a behavior that used to get it. For example, if a child used to get attention for whining and you stop giving attention, extinction, the whining should eventually decrease. Question 6. The time between a demand or instruction, like sit down, and the beginning of the learner's response, the start of them sitting, is called A. Duration, B. Frequency, C. Latency, D. Interresponse time, IRT. Answer: C. Latency. Explanation. This question asks about measuring the time it takes for a behavior to start after a cue. Latency is the time from when a stimulus, like an instruction or a sound, is presented to when the behavior begins. Duration is how long the behavior lasts. Frequency is how many times it happens. Interresponse time, IRT, is the time between two consecutive instances of the same behavior. If you're measuring the lag time before the behavior starts after a specific prompt, you're measuring latency. Question 7. An event that happens before a behavior occurs is called a consequence, B. Antecedent, C. Reinforcer, D. Response. Answer: B. Antecedent. Explanation. This question is about the A in the ABC of behavior. In the three-term contingency, the antecedent is what happens right before the behavior. The behavior is what the person does. The consequence is what happens right after the behavior. A reinforcer is a type of consequence that increases behavior. The antecedent is the situation, cue, or event that sets the stage for the behavior. Think of it as what happens just before the action. Question 8. When a behavior occurs more often in the presence of a specific stimulus than in its absence, we say the behavior is under the control of that stimulus. This is called A. Generalization, B. Discrimination, C. Stimulus control, D. Motivating operation. Answer: C. Stimulus control. Explanation. This question describes stimulus control when a specific stimulus, like a red traffic light, reliably leads to a specific behavior, stopping the car, while a different stimulus, a green light, leads to a different behavior, driving. The behavior is under stimulus control. The stimulus cues you when the behavior is likely to lead to a certain consequence, like avoiding a ticket or getting to your destination. Generalization is responding similarly to different stimuli. Discrimination is responding differently to different stimuli, a result of stimulus control. A motivating operation changes the value of a reinforcer. Stimulus control is simply when a cue makes a behavior more or less likely. Question 9. When a behavior is followed immediately by the presentation of a stimulus, and this causes the behavior to happen less often in the future, this is called A. Negative reinforcement, B. Positive punishment, C. Positive reinforcement, D. Extinction. Answer: B. Positive punishment. Explanation. This question is about positive punishment, which decreases behavior. The keywords are followed immediately by the presentation of a stimulus, something is added, and the behavior happening less often in the future. The behavior decreases. When adding something unpleasant after a behavior makes that behavior less likely to happen again, that's positive punishment. For example, if a child touches a hot stove, behavior, and feels pain, adding a stimulus, they are less likely to touch it again. Positive means add, punishment means decrease. Question 10. A visual display showing how a behavior changes over time is called a task analysis, B. Behavior definition, C. Datasheet, D. Graph. Answer: D. Graph. Explanation. This question asks about how we visualize data in ABA. A graph is a chart or diagram that shows the relationship between different pieces of data, usually how a behavior changes over time. Graphs are essential in ABA because they let us see trends and the effects of our interventions very clearly. A task analysis breaks down a skill. A behavior definition describes the behavior. A data sheet is where you record raw data. A graph is how you display that data visually to analyze progress. Question 11. When a behavior is followed immediately by the removal of a stimulus, and this causes the behavior to happen less often in the future, this is called A. Negative punishment, B. Negative reinforcement, C. Positive punishment, D. Extinction. Answer. A. Negative punishment. Explanation. This question is about negative punishment, which also decreases behavior. The keywords are followed immediately by the removal of a stimulus, something is taken away, and the behavior happening less often in the future. The behavior decreases. When taking away something the person likes or wants after a behavior makes that behavior less likely to happen again. That's negative punishment. For example, if a child screams, behavior, and you immediately take away their favorite toy, removal of a stimulus, and they scream less often in the future, that's negative punishment. Negative means remove, punishment means decrease. Question 12. Which dimension of behavior refers to the total amount of time a behavior occurs from start to finish? A. Frequency, B. Duration, C. Latency, D. Count. Answer. B. Duration. Explanation. This question asks about measuring the length of a behavior. Duration is the measure of how long an instance of a behavior lasts, from when it starts to when it stops. Frequency, or count, is how many times it happens. Latency is the time before it starts. If you're timing how long a tantrum lasts or how long someone reads, you're measuring duration. Question 13. An event that happens after a behavior occurs is called a in A. Antecedent, B. Stimulus, C. Consequence, D. Prompt. Answer. C. Consequence. Explanation. This question is about the C in the ABC of behavior. A consequence is anything that happens immediately after a behavior occurs. Consequences can be reinforcers, making the behavior more likely, or punishers, making the behavior less likely, or they might have no effect. The antecedent is what happens before, a stimulus is any event or object, and a prompt is help given during teaching. What follows the action is the consequence. Question 14. When you reinforce a behavior that is an appropriate alternative to a problem behavior, while also withholding reinforcement for the problem behavior, this is called A. DRO, differential reinforcement of other behavior, B. DDRI, differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, C. DDRL, differential reinforcement of low rates, D. DDRA, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. Answer. D. DRA, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. Explanation. This question asks about a specific differential reinforcement procedure. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DRA, involves reinforcing a specific behavior that is an appropriate substitute or alternative to the unwanted behavior, while putting the unwanted behavior on extinction, not reinforcing it. For example, reinforcing a child for asking for a break instead of screaming. DRO reinforces the absence of the behavior. DRI reinforces a behavior that is physically incompatible with the problem behavior. DRL reinforces a lower rate of the behavior, reinforcing a specific, better behavior to replace the problem one is DRA. Question 15. Which type of verbal behavior involves the speaker asking for something they want and the consequence is getting that thing? A. Tact, B. Etroic, C. Intraverbal, D. Mand. Answer D. Mand. Explanation. This question is about Skinner's analysis of verbal behavior. A mand is essentially a request or a demand. It's controlled by a motivating operation, like being hungry makes you want food, and the consequence is receiving the item or action requested. For example, saying water when you are thirsty and getting water is a mand. A tact is labeling, saying water when you see water. An echoic is repeating what you hear, saying water after someone else says water. An intraverbal is like conversational filler or answering questions. Asking for what you want is a mand. Question 16. A system where clients earn tokens or points for specific behaviors, which they can later exchange for desired items or activities, is called A. Preference assessment. B. Task analysis. C. Functional analysis. D. Token economy. Answer D. Token economy. Explanation. This question describes a token economy. This is a behavior change system where learners earn generalized conditioned reinforcers, tokens, points, stickers, for displaying desired behaviors. These tokens can then be traded for a variety of backup reinforcers, toys, privileges, snacks. It's a way to use reinforcement systematically across many behaviors and rewards. Preference assessments find likes, task analyses break down skills, and functional analyses find behavior functions. A system where you earn points to trade for prizes is a token economy. Question 17. Breaking a complex skill, like tying shoes, into a sequence of smaller, manageable steps is called A. Shaping. B. Chaining. C. Task analysis. D. Generalization. Answer C. Task analysis. Explanation. This question asks about how we prepare to teach multi-step skills. A task analysis is the process of analyzing a complex skill and breaking it down into a sequence of individual, smaller steps that the learner can more easily learn. Shaping teaches a single new behavior. Chaining is the method used to teach the steps of a task analysis. Generalization is when a behavior occurs in new situations. The process of identifying and listing the steps is the task analysis itself. It's like writing a step-by-step instruction manual for the skill. Question 18. When teaching a new behavior, you provide extra help or hints to make it more likely the client will perform the behavior correctly. This extra help is called in. A. Reinforcer. B. Consequence. C. Prompt. D. Stimulus. Answer C. Prompt. Explanation. This question asks about assistance provided during teaching. A prompt is supplementary help added to the teaching situation to make the correct response more likely to occur. Prompts can be physical guidance, verbal hints, gestures, or models. A reinforcer is delivered after the behavior. A consequence happens after the behavior. A stimulus is any event or object, but a prompt is a specific type of stimulus added to help the response. Giving a little bit of help to get the right behavior started is using a prompt. Question 19. Which ethical principle requires behavior analysts to design interventions that are scientifically supported and likely to be effective? A. Integrity. Be truthful and honest. B. Justice. Be fair. C. Beneficence. Do good. D. Fidelity. Be trustworthy. Answer C. Beneficence. Do good. Explanation. This question relates to the ethical obligation to help clients effectively. The principle of beneficence means behavior analysts have a responsibility to act in the best interests of their clients and promote their well-being. This includes using interventions that are based on scientific evidence and are likely to produce positive outcomes while minimizing harm. Integrity is about honesty. Justice is about fairness. Fidelity is about trust. Choosing effective, helpful procedures falls under the umbrella of doing good for the client. Question 20. The process of gradually reducing the amount of help, prompts, you provide as a learner becomes more independent is called A. Shaping. B. Prompt fading. C. Stimulus fading. D. Chaining. Answer B. Prompt fading. Explanation. This question describes prompt fading. Once a learner starts to perform a behavior consistently with a prompt, you gradually decrease the level of help you provide until they can do the behavior with just the natural cue, like an instruction or seeing the item. This systematic reduction of the prompt is prompt fading. Shaping teaches new behaviors. Stimulus fading changes the stimulus itself. Chaining teaches sequences of behaviors. Slowly taking away the training wheels of help is prompt fading. Question 21. Which type of verbal behavior involves the speaker labeling something in the environment? Example, saying car when they see a car. A. Mand. B. Echoic. C. Tact. D. Intraverbal. Answer C. Tact. Explanation. This question is about another type of verbal behavior. A tact is controlled by a nonverbal stimulus in the environment, seeing or hearing something, and involves the speaker naming or labeling that stimulus. For example, seeing a car and saying car is a tact. Mands ask for things, echoics repeat what's heard, and intraverbals are conversational responses. Labeling things you perceive is called tacting. Question 22. Data collection methods that capture every instance of the behavior, such as frequency, duration, or latency, are called A. Discontinuous measurement. B. Indirect measurement. C. Continuous measurement. D. Interval recording. Answer C. Continuous measurement. Explanation. This question asks about measurement methods that record every time the behavior happens or how long it lasts. Continuous measurement involves recording every single occurrence of the behavior or its specific dimension throughout the entire observation period. Frequency, duration, latency, and interresponse time, IRT, are all examples of continuous measurement. Discontinuous measurement, like interval recording or time sampling, only captures a sample of the behavior. Indirect measurement gathers information from others. Interval recording is a type of discontinuous measurement. If you track every single time or second the behavior occurs, you're using continuous measurement. Question 23. When a behavior occurs in the presence of a specific stimulus because it has been reinforced in that stimulus's presence in the past, but does not occur in the presence of other stimuli, the behavior is under A. Generalization. B. Stimulus control. C. Automatic reinforcement. D. Respondent control. Answer B. Stimulus control. Explanation. This question is about stimulus control again, but emphasizes the difference in responding across different stimuli. When a stimulus reliably signals that a behavior will be reinforced, and the behavior happens when that stimulus is present but not when it's absent or a different stimulus is present, the behavior is under stimulus control. The stimulus cues the likelihood of reinforcement. Generalization is responding similarly to different stimuli. Automatic reinforcement is internal reinforcement. Respondent control is related to reflexes. Stimulus control is about the environment signaling when a behavior will pay off. Question 24. When a therapist physically guides a client's hand to perform a movement, this is what type of prompt? A. Verbal prompt. B. Gestural prompt. C. Model prompt. D. Physical prompt. Answer D. Physical prompt. Explanation. This question asks about a type of prompt involving touch. A physical prompt involves physically assisting the learner to perform the desired response. Guiding their hand, touching their elbow, or helping them stand are all physical prompts. A verbal prompt is telling them. A gestural prompt is showing them with emotion, like pointing. A model prompt is demonstrating the behavior for them to copy. Any type of physical contact used as help is a physical prompt. Question 25. Which ethical principle emphasizes being trustworthy, reliable, and maintaining professional boundaries? A. Beneficence, do good. B. Fidelity, be trustworthy. C. Justice, be fair. D. Integrity, be truthful and honest. Answer B. Fidelity, be trustworthy. Explanation. This question relates to the ethical principle of fidelity. Fidelity means being trustworthy, honoring commitments, and maintaining professional relationships and boundaries. This includes being reliable, keeping promises to clients and stakeholders, and avoiding dual relationships that could compromise objectivity. Beneficence is doing good. Justice is fairness. Integrity is honesty. Being someone people can rely on and trust is about practicing with fidelity. Question 26. You are teaching a child to put their toys away. The skill has 5 steps. You teach the steps one at a time, starting with the first step, pick up toy, then reinforcing the child for doing just that step. Once mastered, you teach the first 2 steps, pick up toy, put in box, and reinforce, and so on, until the child can do all 5 steps in order. This teaching procedure is called A. Backward chaining, B. Total task presentation, C. Forward chaining, D. Shaping. Answer C. Forward chaining. Explanation. This question describes forward chaining. In forward chaining, you break a skill into steps using a task analysis and teach the steps in the natural order, starting with the first step. Once the first step is mastered, you teach the first 2 steps, then the first 3, and so on, until the entire chain is learned. Backward chaining teaches the last step first. Total task presentation teaches all steps at once. Shaping reinforces approximations of a single behavior. Teaching from the beginning of the sequence to the end is forward chaining. Question 27. When a challenging behavior occurs because it provides a sensory experience or feeling to the person doing it. Like flapping hands because it feels good, the function is most likely. A. Attention. B. Escape. C. Access to tangibles. D. Automatic reinforcement. Answer D. Automatic reinforcement. Explanation. This question asks about the function of a behavior maintained by internal sensation. Automatic reinforcement occurs when the behavior itself produces a reinforcing consequence without the involvement of another person or getting an external item. If that consequence is a sensory feeling, seeing patterns from flapping, feeling vibration, hearing sounds, it's often called automatic sensory reinforcement. Attention, escape, and access to tangibles are functions that involve social interaction or getting something external. Behaviors that feel good to do, even when alone, are likely maintained by automatic reinforcement. Question 28. Which dimension of behavior refers to the time between 2 consecutive instances of the same behavior? A. Duration. B. Latency. C. Frequency. D. Interresponse time, IRT. Answer D. Interresponse time, IRT. Explanation. This question specifically asks about the time between occurrences of the same behavior. Interresponse time, IRT, is the time measured from the end of one instance of a behavior to the beginning of the next instance of that identical behavior. Duration is how long one instance lasts. Latency is the time from a stimulus to the start of the behavior. Frequency is the count. IRT measures the gaps between repetitions of the same behavior. Question 29. When collecting data using partial interval recording, you record whether the behavior occurred. A. At the very beginning of the interval. B. At any point during the interval. C. Throughout the entire interval. D. Exactly at the end of the interval. Answer B. At any point during the interval. Explanation. This question asks about a specific discontinuous measurement method. In partial interval recording, you mark the interval if the behavior occurred at any point during that interval, even if it was very brief. You are not concerned if it lasted the whole interval or happened at a specific moment, just that it happened at all within that time block. Whole interval requires it to happen throughout. Momentary time sampling checks at the end. Frequency counts every time. If you mark the box just because the behavior popped up at least once in the interval, you're using partial interval recording. Question 30. The ethical principle of justice in ABA relates to A. Using the least restrictive procedures. B. Being truthful and honest. C. Providing services fairly and equitably to all who need them. D. Doing what is best for the client. Answer C. Providing services fairly and equitably to all who need them. Explanation. This question is about the ethical principle of justice. Justice in ABA emphasizes fairness, equity, and access. It means advocating for and ensuring that individuals in need receive appropriate, effective behavior analytic services, regardless of factors like race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, disability, or geographic location. Using least restrictive procedures is part of beneficence/responsibility. Truthfulness is integrity. Doing what's best for the client is beneficence/responsibility. Justice focuses on ensuring fair treatment and access to services for everyone. Question 31. A behavior that is learned because it is paired with a naturally occurring stimulus-response reflex is central to A. Operant conditioning. B. Respondent conditioning, classical conditioning. C. Functional assessment. D. Stimulus control. Answer B. Respondent conditioning, classical conditioning. Explanation. This question is about the type of learning that involves reflexes and associations. Respondent conditioning, also known as classical conditioning, is when a previously neutral stimulus is paired with an unconditioned stimulus that automatically elicits a response, a reflex. After pairing, the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus that can also elicit a similar response. For example, Pavlov's dogs learn to salivate, response, at the sound of a bell, previously neutral stimulus, because the bell was paired with food, unconditioned stimulus that naturally caused salivation. Operant conditioning is learning through consequences. Functional assessment finds behavior function. Stimulus control is when a stimulus cues behavior. Pairing stimuli to create new reflexes is respondent conditioning. Question 32. An event that occurs before a behavior and decreases the current value of a reinforcer and makes behaviors that have led to that reinforcer less likely to occur is specifically called an A. Discriminative stimulus, SD. B. Conditioned stimulus, CS. C. Establishing operation, EO. D. Abolishing operation, AO. Answer D. Abolishing operation, AO. Explanation. This question asks about the type of motivating operation, MO, that decreases the effectiveness of a reinforcer. An abolishing operation, AO, is a type of MO that decreases the effectiveness of a reinforcer, makes you want it less, and decreases the current frequency of behaviors that have been reinforced by that reinforcer in the past. For example, having just eaten a large meal, AO, makes food less reinforcing and makes you less likely to seek food. An establishing operation, EO, is the opposite. SD is signal when reinforcement is available. CS is from classical conditioning. The dual effect on value and behavior likelihood before the response, causing a decrease, points to the AO. Question 33. When collecting data using whole interval recording, you record whether the behavior occurred. A. At the very beginning of the interval. B. At any point during the interval. C. Throughout the entire interval. D. Exactly at the end of the interval. Answer. C. Throughout the entire interval. Explanation. This question asks about another discontinuous measurement method. In whole interval recording, you mark the interval only if the behavior occurred continuously throughout the entire duration of that interval. This method often underestimates the actual occurrence of behaviors that happen often but briefly. Partial interval records any occurrence. Momentary time sampling checks at the end. Frequency counts every instance. The requirement that the behavior fill the whole interval is the key for whole interval recording. Question 34. A type of reinforcement schedule where reinforcement is delivered after a variable, unpredictable amount of time has passed since the last reinforcement, averaging out to a specific time, is called a fixed ratio, FR, B, variable ratio, VR, C, fixed interval, FI, D, variable interval, VI. Answer: D, variable interval, VI. Explanation: this question describes a time-based reinforcement schedule that is unpredictable. In a variable interval, VI schedule, the first response after a certain amount of time is reinforced, but the length of that time interval changes from one reinforcement to the next. Only averaging out to a specific time, example VI 5 minutes, means reinforcement is available on average after 5 minutes, but could be 3 minutes, then 7, then 4, etc. This makes the timing unpredictable. Fixed interval, FI, uses a fixed time ratio schedules. FR, VR are based on the number of responses, the combination of variable and interval points to VI. This schedule typically produces a steady, moderate rate of responding. Question 35. Which ethical principle emphasizes that behavior analysts should be truthful, honest, and accurate in their professional work? A. Beneficence, do good. B. Fidelity, be trustworthy. C. Integrity, be truthful and honest. D. Non-maleficence, do no harm. Answer: C. Integrity, be truthful and honest. Explanation: this question is about the ethical principle of integrity. Integrity in the ethical code refers to being truthful, honest, accurate, and fair in all professional activities. This includes being accurate in your data and reporting, honest in your communication, and avoiding deception or misrepresentation. Beneficence is doing good, fidelity is trustworthiness, and non-maleficence is avoiding harm. Maintaining accuracy and honesty in your practice is covered by the principle of integrity.